Let's get started with that RSpan lab. We're going to start on MLS1 where our source ports are fast Ethernet 0/1 through 5. Our RSpan VLAN is 30, which has not been created, and I'm not running VTP. The trunk is up and running, and also I have removed the local span config from the last video. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. The first thing I really want you to do is that. We concentrate so much on monitor session and we forget to define the remote span VLAN. You have to do that. So I just make a habit of doing it first. So now we can go to monitor session. And as I mentioned, you have to watch your commands here. You can't just cut and paste from one switch to the next because you're looking at it from the point of view of the switch, especially where the source is really source and destination. I shouldn't say just the source. So let's go back and look at the diagram. Well, what's the source as far as switch 1 is concerned? Well, of course, it's those 5 ports. What is the destination? That's kind of the question there. What is the destination? I'm still here, I'm just talking. What is our destination? It's not an interface. We need to put remote here, and then we do need to actually enter the word VLAN. Our destination, as far as switch 1 is concerned, is that RSpan VLAN, and that's going to be 30. And then that's it. So we can just run show monitor very quickly, and you've got a remote source session going on, so that's RSpan. You see the source ports, and the destination RSpan VLAN is 30. That's all we need to do there. Let's go over to our other switch. And what are we going to do first? Well, I'm already showing you. You've got to get that remote span command on the right VLAN. Let's see. Let's go ahead with 5 over here too. Unrecognized command. Isn't it monitor session? Isn't that what I'm doing? Okay. Let's try that again. Why am I getting unrecognized command there? I'm in the right config mode. Monitor session is the command. We've used it a couple of times already. The reason you're seeing unrecognized command, I'm about to save you some more unnecessary troubleshooting time because occasionally somebody will just go, man, the switch doesn't run span. Doing monitor session 10. Well, the problem is, remember those 2950s I mentioned? I threw one of those in the rack here. And I wanted to show you this because it's kind of odd. You kind of expect the switch would say you only have 2 available sessions, something like that. It doesn't do that. It just says, I don't recognize what you're trying to do. So it's human nature to say, well, let me check my config mode. Well, let me check the command. I know it's monitor session. And the thing is, you're right all the way. You're just limited on this particular switch model to 2. And the switch doesn't say you're limited to 2. It just says, hey, I don't recognize the command. Then when you put in a proper number, then you're perfectly fine. So there you go. So monitor session 2, you're all fine there. And I'm definitely not dumping on 2950s, by the way. They're really good home lab switches. Let's see. So we use monitor session 2. Now, what is the source of the traffic as far as the switch is concerned? Switch 2. Switch 2 isn't looking at these 5 source ports over here as the source. It really doesn't even know anything about those 5 switch ports. What it knows is that the mirrored traffic is coming in on VLAN 30. You see now why I was so adamant that you cannot just cut and paste this config from one switch to another. It's not going to work. Session 2 destination. And this, of course, is going to be our interface, which in this case I believe was faster 10. And that's it. So let's run show monitor. And that's all there is to it. You're running a remote destination session, source RSpan VLAN 30, and your destination port is 0/10. And that is it. That's all there is to RSpan. You just have to watch your config, look at it from the source's point of view, and then of course don't forget to define your remote span VLAN. That's just fun to say, remote span VLAN. So we've got everything else here up and running. Like I said, one of the toughest parts of working with span, I think the toughest part, It's just remembering the ports that are eligible and not eligible to be source and or destination ports. I guarantee you some of this is going to come up on your exam. I don't think Cisco knows how to write an exam that doesn't have something about source and destination ports and span. That's pretty common knowledge. So a quick reminder, and the one command I want to show you here on the board is that, again, by default, traffic both from the source port and destined for the source port, as defined in span, is mirrored to the destination port. To change this, you can use the RX and TX options at the end of monitor session. You can also enter both. Let's say that you've changed it to monitor receive traffic only, and then you say, oh, well, you know, I really want to have the default. You could just enter both. A source port can be monitored in multiple simultaneous span sessions. Now, a source port can be part of an ether channel, and you can use span to monitor an entire ether channel by specifying that ether channel's port channel interface as the source. We saw that in the monitor session command in the last video, that we could choose a VLAN, an entire VLAN to be the source. We could choose individual interfaces, which is what we did here a couple of times. And you could also choose an entire ether channel. Now be aware that if your source port is a port that's in an ether channel, as you would expect, only the traffic going over that specific port will be mirrored. There's no remote inheritance, you know what I mean? It's like if you have 4 ports in an ether channel and you're monitoring one, that's the only one that's going to have its traffic mirrored. If you want all the traffic on an ether channel to be mirrored, you have to make the entire ether channel the source port by specifying its port channel interface. A source port cannot also be a destination port. Makes sense? As I mentioned, VLAN membership doesn't matter. Ports from different VLANs can serve as source ports for the same span session. I did mention about vSpan, but I'm just reminding you that an entire VLAN can be configured as a source port. A trunk port can be a source port, but be aware that every single bit of traffic on any of the VLANs that are part of that trunk will be mirrored to the destination port. Not trying to scare you, that may be exactly what you want, but you should be aware of it. The speed of the port doesn't affect a port's ability to be a source port or a destination port, but it's a good idea to have your destination port be equal or higher in speed than the source ports. Because if your source port bandwidth is huge and your destination port speed is not huge, you might end up dropping a lot of traffic. You might overwhelm that destination port. A couple of destination port notes for you. A destination port can participate in only one span session. A destination port cannot be a source port, nor can a single port serve as the destination for multiple span sessions. Said the same thing there twice, but it's all good. While source ports can be part of an ether channel, a destination port cannot be part of an ether channel. A destination span port, it's just not going to participate. It's very antisocial. Doesn't participate in SDP, CDP, VTP, DTP, PAGP, or LACP. Trunk ports can be configured as source and or destination ports. Again, the default behavior is resulting in the monitoring of all active VLANs on the trunk. I know I hit you over the head with a couple things there twice, but you can thank me later. One more thing before we move on. Remember that remote span command? Of course you do. Then I mentioned that you need to have on all the switches, both switches in your config that we did here. Well, I just want to illustrate this to you. I didn't mention it, but I want to illustrate it for you as well. If you have switches between the switch with source ports and the one with the destination ports, you need that command on every single intermediate switch. You've got to name VLAN 30 as the remote span VLAN on every switch that's between the one with your source ports and the one with your destination ports. That is enough span for one day, I think. I believe next we're going to control some broadcast and unicast and multicast storms. I'll see you on the very next video. We'll take care of business.